All right, so moving on. Next question for Eric. I don't see the questioner's name here, but the question is machines versus free weights for hypertrophy. Which allows the greatest volumes and gains with 4Zs?
Yeah, so there's a reason why I arranged the questions this way, because I think this question, we have a little bit of overlapping referencing. So I think when it comes to machines versus free weights, one of the benefits to me of machines are that they allow for additional variety, as you mentioned. And so for some people, that variety is going to meet their preferences better. Like you said, some people really enjoy having that variety. I intended to talk a lot about that study by Fonseca et al. That you talked about with squats only versus a variety of exercises. And I think that's really a place where machines shine is if you walk into a commercial gym setting and you say like, yeah, I want to get plenty of leg volume, but I don't want to just like squat until I puke. What's really great is that the machines offer you a way to target different muscle groups at different angles, get a more varied stimulus for hypertrophy. So, the reason I wanted to bring up that Fonseca study, they compare the squat only versus squat with leg press, deadlift, and lunges. Obviously, only one of those is a machine, but certainly when you have a commercial gym setup and all those machines at your disposal, you can imagine that for a given amount of total number of sets for a leg workout, it really opens up the playbook in terms of, being able to give a nice, well-rounded stimulus for hypertrophy. And one of the cool things about machines, or another cool thing, is the fact that machines can be used with really minimal setup time, and without a great deal of skill or experience. You could be working with an online client who maybe is beginner to intermediate with skill level, and you don't want to assign them really specialized free weight accessory exercises that either require a great deal of skill and balance, or they might just not be advanced enough. They might not be ready for them yet. Or frankly, they might just be a pain in the ass to set up. And so it's like, you know what? We could also just go to a hack squat machine, which hack squat machines are probably among the most underrated machines that you could possibly find in a gym. Nothing better for the quads than a well-made hack squat machine. So I think that machines certainly have a place. And I think one of the things about machines that is frustrating is that they've developed such a bad reputation among the more like hardcore lifters within certain pockets of the fitness industry. There are certainly some pretty old school folks who are perceived to be pretty hardcore lifters that still utilize all sorts of machines, but I think for a lot of people, they think like, it's free weights or bust basically. But machines, they should very much be a viable part of the playbook that you have at your disposal. And there is a study by Fabrizio Rossi et al. And so Fabrizio, I actually got a chance to meet him when he was working with Jason Kaliva down in Coastal Carolina. Really good guy, really good researcher. And in that collaboration with Jason Kaliva, they did a study looking at squat versus leg press. And I think they had a third treatment arm, which was squat and leg press. And without getting really far into the details of that study, basically what they found was for most of their outcomes, whether you were squatting, leg pressing, or both, you were pretty fine. The outcomes were fairly similar. Specifically when it comes to the lean body mass changes, they were pretty much equivalent with the three of those groups. The functional outcomes varied a little bit, and obviously when it comes to exercise, specificity is a very important consideration. So there are certainly some physical tasks where you can't just throw out in the squat and say, whatever, I'm going to leg press instead, right? Specificity absolutely is important to keep in mind. But when the question was specifically about hypertrophy, I think with hypertrophy, I don't think it's fair to say that machines are better than free weights. And I think certainly you would want, assuming that you don't have any constraints in terms of injuries or skill level, I still think you want to build the base of your program around compound movements that are likely to feature a lot of free weights. But I don't see any reason to consider free weights to be unequivocally superior to machines when the machines are utilized well within the context of the program. So my advice to people when it comes to getting in your volume to promote the hypertrophy you're looking for, just understand that free weight and machine exercises are all on the table. I think for most people, a combination of the two is going to make a lot more sense than going really hard in one direction or the other. You can do just fine in terms of hypertrophy if you're going machines only, and you can do just fine for hypertrophy if you're going free weights only. So I don't think it's a dichotomy that is particularly constructive. I think you put together a program, you want to make sure if hypertrophy is the goal, you want to make sure you have sufficient volume. And as we've talked about, it might make sense to make sure you have plenty of exercise variety in the mix. And if some of those are machines, no problem at all. Another cool thing about utilizing a variety of exercises, this is something we've touched on before, which is kind of a bit of a tangent, but I know for me, anecdotally, I'm by no means anywhere close to an expert on injury or anything of the sort, but if I just hammer a single lift in the same plane of motion, in the same angle, in the same direction, set after set after set, day after day, that can really bring a little bit of wear and tear to the joints involved. And so sometimes a nice thing about variety with your exercise selection, whether it's with machines, free weights, or both, is that you're hitting things at different angles, loading the joints a little bit differently and the different tissues that make up the joint. And it can be a nice beneficial aspect that you are giving your joints a little bit of variety as well and not overloading them the exact same way set after set after set. So that's my take. Do you have anything to add when it comes to machines, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I think it largely depends on what machine you're talking about and what free weight exercise you're comparing it to. So, for example, you mentioned a study comparing squats versus leg press. And the thing about squats and leg press is they're pretty similar exercises. So in both cases, they have a varied strength curve. So there's a part of the range of motion where you're weaker, and there's a part of range of motion where you're stronger. But they have flat resistance curves. So the amount of resistance a barbell is pushing down on you with is the same throughout the range of motion. Same thing with a leg press. The amount of force the sled of the leg press is pushing into your feet with is the same throughout the range of motion. So those are fairly comparable exercises in terms of comparing strength curve to resistance curve. However, if we look at something like, say, a Pec Fly or a pullover and compare that to like a pec deck or a really high quality pullover machine, I think it could be a little bit different hypertrophy wise. So if you do a full range of motion fly, it's hard at the bottom. By the time the weight's a third of the way up, it's stupidly easy. Same thing with a pullover. When the dumbbell is below your head or near head level, it's pretty challenging. Once you bring it probably 4 or 5 inches above head level, it's super easy. Compare that to a pec deck, which is specifically designed to be able to keep tension on your pecs through the entire range of motion. Or like we've talked about on this podcast before, both Eric and I love a well-made pullover machine. Keeps really great tension on your lats and probably long head of your triceps to some degree as well. But really, really great tension on your lats through the entire range of motion. I would be a little surprised if a pullover machine wasn't better for lat hypertrophy than a dumbbell or an easy bar pullover was for lat hypertrophy. I'd be a little surprised if a pec deck wasn't a little bit better for pec hypertrophy than dumbbell flies were for pec hypertrophy. So they have that benefit of being able to match strength curves to resistance curves a little bit better, or I guess resistance curves to strength curves. Like the way the cam systems are built, that's literally what they're designed to do. And for some free weight exercises, I doubt that matters all that much because the strength curve is relatively flat. But for some free weight exercises, I do think that could make quite a bit of a difference and give an advantage to machines. And then another thing I would say is I very much agree with Eric that it's good to have variety. And I think sometimes you're a little bit limited variety-wise with free weights in terms of being able to pick exercises where you can really make sure you're going to be limited by the target muscle and can keep, good stress on that target muscle. So for example, if you're trying to train your quads and you're doing free weight exercises, you have squats and some variety of squats. That's good. Where do you go after that? Bulgarian split squats, those are okay. But until you get really good at them, do you really want to go to failure? Because, you could lose your balance. Well, okay, let's do dumbbell Bulgarian split squats. So if you start losing your balance, you just drop the dumbbells. That's fine. But as you get stronger, grip is going to become a limiter before quad fatigue is. Like step ups or lunges, similar type things. Like balance could become an issue, or just getting other muscles involved could start limiting you before you actually are able to fatigue the muscle that you're trying to fatigue. But if you open yourself up to also using machines to get that variety, then, you could do hack squats. That's always going to be limited by your quads. Or leg press, which if you do it correctly, can also always be limited by your quads. So in that case, machines wouldn't strictly be better, but it's more like, for some muscles, there is a tremendous amount of variety you could achieve with just free weights. And for other muscles, you're going to be somewhat limited with really good exercise selection unless you open yourself up to working some machines in as well.